and welcome. My name is Piers, Ridyard, CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. Today we have another Fireside chat, today with Matthew Hine, Chief Product Officer of RDX Works, and we're going to be talking a bit more about all things mobile and specifically the Radix mobile wallet. So, Matt, welcome on, and let's start by just sort of giving a bit of an overview. We now have the roadmap live on our doc site, docs.radixdlt.com. We have several sections. We've got milestones, we've got underway, we've got backlog. So could you just give us like a bit of context about how to understand what these things are and how I should, like, if I'm just coming on and I'm being like, when's my thing going to be ready, or when's this thing happening, or like what's important? Just an understanding of how to understand these different things first, and then let's go into the milestones and talk through why they're important.
Yeah, this is a good fireside topic. This is like, get cozy by the fire, get your glass of cognac, and we'll talk about the intricacies of wallet development, how we prioritize things and everything. This is like a good meaty topic.
This is when you want your pipe.
That's right. Yeah, I put it away. Here it is. I found the pipe. Let's talk about the wallet. Milestones. So yeah, as I said, we've broken up the roadmap on docs.radixdlt.com into a few sections because it's pretty important to understand that like development isn't just kind of like a list of features you're putting in. You kind of like put them in a priority order and you just pick them off one at a one. Like what you want to do is think of your roadmap, and particularly on something like the wallet, which is a user-facing application. You really want to think this in terms of there are some really big sort of broad technical things that are going to require a lot of work to enable. Then there's going to be some smaller scale things. Like these are real features that need to go in there. They're going to take some work, but they're not like research projects. The risk is low, but they're going to take some work. And then you get down to like smaller and smaller scale things. And having those split out, and this isn't just split out for the public roadmap. I mean, we do this internally as well. It's quite important to have these sorts of things because you don't either want to, there's two bad modes you can get into. You can get into mode where you say like, we're just going to totally focus on the large scale things, get those done first before we distract ourselves with the small things. And if you do that, then you're constantly going to be like, your product is always going to be kind of buggy. And there's going to be all these little bits of low hanging fruit and quality of life that you're never going to get to because you're always going to be working on large scale things that are super important to get out. But if you go the other way, if you say like, well, we got to fix all the little things first before we even think about the large scale things, then you're just going to be in a reactive mode, and basically like development is going to grind to the halt, and you're just going to always be refining rather than pushing it forward and really progressing the user experience. So we break this up pretty consciously. So the milestones section of the roadmap is the large scale stuff. These are things like there's some real serious work to be done here on like, defining the right user experience, working out the way this works underneath the hood. How does this interact with our APIs and our other technologies? Like each one of these is going to take months. Let's say, you don't know if that's a small number of months or a large number of months, but it's large scale stuff. Underway and backlog go together. In fact, underway, backlog, and complete all really go together if you're looking on the thing. Basically, the idea is these are all the smaller scale things that you kind of want to just knock out when you can. So the backlog is kind of our like main thing that we pull from. And you'll see if you go to the backlog section, we even have kind of like a high priority backlog where it's like, yeah, these are the things that we're pretty much interested in doing as soon as we can. Whereas the underway is we wanted to establish that section to show people, literally, this is what we're building right now. Like there are people writing code against these things at this moment. Some of those things might take a couple of days. Some of those things might take some weeks. We don't really know, but they are being worked on actively. And so you can expect that those will come out in relatively near-term releases. So basically what we do, and this is literally how we treat this inside the team, is we always have some key personnel working on the milestone stuff. It's like, we need a big brain that's just focused on make sure this milestone work is progressing forward. And this is going to take you a long period of time, but you really need to have someone focused on that and making sure that's working. Then you have a different set of developers basically contributing on pulling stuff off the backlog, release after release, and moving that to the underway section, getting it built, getting it launched. And for every one of those releases on the underway, what we tend to do is pick off there's usually one or two kind of like banner features. And by a feature, I mean like new capabilities in the wallet. It's not fixing things. It's like there's one or two things we say like, this is going to be the definition of this release, is that we're going to get in, 5 new transaction manifest summaries, or we're going to get in, like the ability of hiding accounts or something like that. And then once you've established that as like, okay, we think we can get this done in X number of weeks, then you have people working on that. And then you always constantly have fill-in time. You always have developers to be like, I finished my work for the day. I've got an extra a couple of hours left. Let me grab one of the small items off the backlog. And we always have a bunch of things that are urgent bug fixes that we know we need to get done with high priority. And then things that you'll see this on the backlog, is we have a section called quality of life improvements. And quality of life are basically like, none of these things take very much time. Every one of them will just make the experience a little bit better, a little bit more understandable, a little more refined. We pick off the high priority ones and just kind of progressively get those in there. So what this means is that we have progress going on all the time at all 3 of these levels. We've got someone that's sitting there working on a milestone item where you're not going to see the result of that for a while. You've got people that are working on a feature release, which is probably going to be with the definition of the next thing that actually goes out. And then you get people, kind of the same set of people, which is just throwing in a bunch of mixed stuff to make sure that we're addressing stuff. In the beginning,
this is kind of like making sure that every release is a full balanced diet.
Right. Yeah,
you got your meat and potatoes, and you've got your trimmings, and you want to make sure that they're all coming together. And by that I mean that you could spend all dev time on any one of these things, but that doesn't, as a whole, move the project towards sort of the greater goals that it set out for itself. And in many ways, if you don't have the deep thinking done alongside sort of feature ads, you'll often end up in a situation where you have a lot of tech debt, or you kind of paint yourself into a corner in terms of functionality. So you always need that deep thinking to be happening, to be feeding into all of the other stuff. But the deep thinking stuff can take longer.
Right. And you're exactly right that it's really useful having the deep think going on, because if you know what that next major milestone is, it inevitably is going to have implications on the rest of the wall. That's kind of the nature. Like anytime you do one of these, it's sort of like, oh yeah, we're going to have to refigure some of these screens, and how this is done is going to be a little bit different. And if you have the more incremental development going on at the same time, you get a reference point on that stuff. It's sort of like, hey, okay, we're going to put this quality of life thing in here, and the person who's working on the milestone item goes, hey, actually, if you're doing that, do it in this way, because we know a couple months from now we're going to need this is going to fit into a bigger picture that we're working on. And it's really good at preventing you from getting into this reactive mode of like, someone on Telegram says there's this problem, and then you just fix it like in this very sort of like, narrow-minded way. You go, okay, we want to fix this, but let's fix it in a way that doesn't paint us into a corner for where we want to go, because we have if you go to the milestone section, this is a really exciting section of the roadmap. The milestone section has so much big picture stuff that we really want to do with the wallet. Like the wallet roadmap is really cool. And we want to make sure that we're not ever getting a situation where you go, we're kind of like paralyzed by all these little small scale changes we made, and we can no longer make progress on those big items. That's got to be the focus for us.
So let's go through the milestones. In the milestones, we've got multi-factor account, persona control and recovery, mobile to mobile dApp support, push notifications and requests, multi-party signing, session streaming mode, and NFC scanning. So let's go through each of these and talk about sort of like their user implications and a bit about why these are milestones rather than just backlog items, right?
Right.
So let's start with multi-factor account control and recovery. And if you can just start off with describing what that is, what functionality that brings, and then we can go into sort of why that's important and why that's not just in the backlog.
Yeah, those who read things I say on Telegram and Discord, like this is kind of the thing that I talk quite a bit about there, in that we have all of these really, really powerful on-ledger multi-factor features. So we have smart accounts, which already today you can set up these very elaborate signing structures. You can set up an account with something we call an access controller, which allows you to define what combination of signatures and badges do you need to withdraw from an account or update the structure to who can recover it if you lose one of the factors. All those on-ledger features are there. What we need to do is enable this in the wallet at a UI level. And this gets more complicated than you think, because you really want to, I think I've probably mentioned this on some roundtable, but I always, whenever I'm talking about consumer apps, it's always a swan swimming upstream, where ultimately what you want to do is make it seem very smooth and elegant on the surface. From the user's point of view, it's like, oh yeah, multi-factor works exactly like I was expecting. Why was this a big deal? Why did this take so long? This seems very simple. Whereas actually there's a bunch of furious plattling just beneath the surface as the swan is struggling to swim upstream. So we have to do the hard work underneath the surface to provide that good user experience. And multi-factor is like a really good example of this, where you have to think about all these edge cases of knowing what state an account is currently in, having the user be able to have kind of like default settings for like, this is generally how I prefer my multi-factor to be set up, but also allow them to say like, well, but this account, this is actually my more secure account. This one I need, I want an extra factor to sign, or I want to have someone different providing recovery. And then you have to provide all of these different user flows for interacting with that. Like it's for applying your settings to an account when you've created it. It's being able to change your settings if you change what you want your preferences to be. It's initiating recovery, allowing your friend to be able to initiate recovery for you that you then confirm on your new phone. So you get a new phone, you recover it from backup, and now you need to sort of sign something that someone else has started. So you get into all these different user flows, and we've got all the screens built for this stuff now. But it's this huge spider web of screens that we need to implement this, and we need to make sure that the logic is operating very, very consistently behind the scenes. So it's a pretty substantial one that we're working on, and it's the top priority one that we want to get out there as soon as we can, because obviously, I'd say just behind the transaction manifest, this is the one that people are rightfully the most excited about as being this really powerful, unique Radix thing.
Right. So basically, the complexity is more in the user interface, user experience side of things than it is in the sort of back-end system. The back-end system is already there on the public ledger. You've just got an immense amount of branching logic. And in many ways, you also want it to be the thing that doesn't have bugs, because it's dealing with recovery. It's dealing with things that people want to feel most secure about. So it's got
and you want it to be the most smooth, because the point is, a lot of the motivating energy for doing multi-factor the way we do it is making it ready for mainstream type users. And so this is going to be one of the first points where we say, look, we're building this multi-factor flow around the idea that a normal person doesn't have to understand a seed phrase. They can answer questions kind of similar to how it would feel to start a bank account. Yeah. And so the user flows need to be very smooth for that.
I mean, the thing that I'm really looking forward to, genuinely looking forward to, is this idea that I can have my wallet on my phone, and I can have a bunch of accounts, but some of them I have to have my two-factor authentication, my YubiKey or my Arculus card or whatever, my ledger device, present for me to be able to sign with it. So I can, walk out my house and my phone's got maybe 5 accounts on it, but I can only use the spend account, which has maybe only got $500 of whatever on it when I'm out of the house. But when I'm back at the house, I have the ability to authenticate with this second factor. I think that's really powerful. I think that it's also really powerful to have multiple factors. So I could have a second factor on me. That means that if I get separated from my phone, no one could do anything with my phone, and I got my second factor, and then I got a third factor at home that for higher value things. All of those things I think feel very human and work around this idea of progressive security on a device that is still the controlling center for everything.
Yeah, I like the fact that different sorts of signing factors are kind of appropriate for different things, and allows you to build up this sort of profile of how you want to interact with your accounts. Where I can see, for example, a ledger device it's a cool device, but it's sort of it's inherently this sort of, it's intended to be frictiony. It's intended to be something that's sort of okay, you got to plug this thing and enter your seed phrase, and you have to do all this stuff to kind of make it, because it's enter your PIN. That's right. Yeah, clearly not enter your seed phrase. My God, why did I say that? Enter your PIN into this thing, and sort of it's intended to be kind of this event when you're doing this, right? And so, like, to me, like, once we get multi-factor, in some ways, I feel like it sort of unlocks the what Ledger was always intended for. It's basically like, what I really want to have a Ledger device for is I want to have something that I can like put in a bank vault, and like I can get access to it when I really need it, but I'm not using it to sign every single day. It's sort of like, it's my fallback. It's a like really secure thing that I can trust and can put away. But like when I'm going around day to day, it's like, you know, if I'm using my basic spending account, maybe I just want to be able to just like, you know, tap an Arculus card to it, and that's like good enough for what I'm doing. So you can build up these profiles depending on what you're doing. You know, if you know, everything from my little fun spending account to I've got my retirement account in here. Like, you're going to have very different profiles for how you configure that.
Yeah. And I really love, I'm sure we'll cover this sort of more when it comes out, but the sort of the different factors that are available for recovery as well. And because you have like recovery and confirmation, and the ability to have confirmation as just basically a password or a set of words that you remember that can be part of that. And because it's just confirmation, they can't use it for anything, but it's a very useful extra step too.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because crypto wallets are very constrained on this. If you have this idea that one seed phrase is everything, the bar is rightfully extremely high for what they call it as cryptographic entropy. Basically, you need very high entropy in that generating that private key, because you want it to never be guessable. You don't want anyone to be able to sort of brute force through and discover these things. But if you have multiple factor, that becomes much less important, because if you have a factor that's like, well, someone could use a huge amount of computing resources and brute force this factor, but all that factor does is confirm something that requires something else, then what have you really accomplished? So it allows us to have more factors than you could ever have in a crypto wallet before, because we can have different bars for these things.
Right. So let's move on to the next milestone, which is mobile to mobile dApp support. So what is mobile to mobile dApp support?
Yep. So as we talk about pretty frequently, I think we even talked about this on the last Fireside, we've built a mobile first wallet experience, but one of the key design goals of this is that, in fact, really one of the reasons to do a mobile first experience is the idea that the phone is the thing that in concept has the ability of kind of connecting to anything. Like, we do many things on our phone that are not limited to just being within the phone. It's like, I tap it to use it as a subway payment, or and now with passkeys, people are doing things where you can log into a web page on your phone using a passkey on your phone. Like, this is kind of the direction of movement on all these things. And so we made the decision with the V1.0 wallet that the first connection we wanted to make was with desktop web browsers, because that's practically speaking where most people do DeFi today. And, we want to address people where they are. But where we are going clearly is people are going to want to do DeFi in multiple places. They'll want to maybe, if you're doing kind of like serious trading or serious, allocating of whatever your funds are, maybe you want to do that on desktop. But then maybe when you're out on train somewhere, you may go like, yeah, actually, I want to do this one quick trade, or I want to do something simple, and I want to be able to do that on my phone. And so we have lots of people in our developer community saying like, hey, are you going to be able to do direct dApp connections with an application running on the phone, either running in a mobile browser or running in a native application on your phone? And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, we've architected the communication protocol with the wallet to work for all of these different types of connections. What we need to do is work through the details now of how do you actually create the back and forth connection? It's weirdly harder than you would think, of like, you have two applications running on your phone and sort of going back and forth between them. There are a lot of different ways of doing this. Like, one of our inspiration points is there's like the Swedish banking system has this kind of like cool mechanism where you can connect your bank account to applications in a web browser, and it has this really, really nice user experience. It just kind of tosses back and forth between their wallet and a mobile app, but it's also kind of requires a centralized system to behind it. So like, there are trade-offs with all these things. So what we're trying to work out is what's the best way of doing this. And deep linking is usually how we refer to this, because it probably involves using the idea of like one application can kind of push data into another application. And this is one way of creating this sort of back and forth. So we're working through the right ways of doing this in a way that's sort of secure and works on multiple mobile browsers and all these sorts of things.
So the way you sort of see this happening is like, let's say that someone releases a Web3 game, which has its own app. and you download the app, and you've already got the Radix Wallet on your phone. And you open up the app and it goes, connect your wallet, and you click connect, and it chucks you over to the Radix Wallet. You confirm what personas and accounts you want to have associated with it. You click confirm, and then it'll throw you back to the app that you started in. Then you carry on in the app, and you need to do your first transaction. You confirm what you want to do in the transaction. It'll throw you over to the Radix Wallet again. You'll see the transaction manifest. You confirm it, and it'll throw you back to the app. Maybe, and we'll be talking about this later in terms of authorizations, maybe you're authorizing some kind of ongoing spend in the wallet, in the app, that you don't need to then come back to the wallet for
right. That's the session streaming mode thing. It's further down the roadmap. Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
So like it's essentially this idea that you have this one place where all of your assets are. You have this one place in which you control the use of those assets and your logins, but it connects seamlessly to the things that you want to use. And we have multiple things coming down the road, which means that you're not going to be switching constantly. There's going to be ways in which you can set up authorizations and stuff like that. That means that once it's initially established and authorized, it's going to be really easy and really smooth to just continue being in the app that you actually care about for the majority of the time. Now, one of the questions that we often, which I have been asked before, was around like, well, why not make it easy for people to bake the wallet into the app instead of having the Radix Wallet as the thing that it chucks you across to? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, because there's a really important aspect of trust involved here. Like, in the team, we often talk about sort of the promises that the wallet makes to the user. Because I think that's the really important thing, is that there are some fundamental promises that when you get the Radix Wallet, it makes these promises to you, and you said like, okay, I know that these things are going to be these promises are going to be kept by the wallet in all circumstances, and that makes me feel more comfortable as I'm interacting with arbitrary applications that are out in the world. Because one of the most important things is the fact that we want to be able to freely connect to any application and have have unlimited choices and do all sorts of really powerful things to interact with our assets. But you're also, when you're interacting with a given application, you don't necessarily want to provide full unlimited trust to that application to say like, well, okay, just because I'm connecting you doesn't mean that you get to spend any of my tokens. Although this actually happens on Ethereum. People provide authorizations to allow smart contracts to just spend funds on their behalf because there's no better way of doing it. So we try to make it so that the reason that the justification for the existence of the wallet is there needs to be something that you installed yourself from a trusted source, and it can make these promises. And it means that no matter what you connect to, if there's something that's going to touch your accounts, touch your assets, do stuff that you care about, that you want to be like, I want to have the final word on these things, the wallet will give that to you. You don't have to trust the application to do that. You can connect the applications, but ultimately the application is just going to make requests to your wallet. And your wallet is then going to be the one that's going to be like, don't worry, anytime there's a transaction that's going to withdraw funds from your account, you're going to be signing that transaction in your Radix wallet. And that's it's building the idea of building a wallet into an application. It works, but the idea is you're now providing full trust to that. It basically becomes, depending how they set up, it's effectively a custodial solution. You're basically going, well, I have an account on that application, and my wallet is sort of integrated with that application. And even if it's a wallet running on your own device, you're inherently trusting them with everything held in that wallet. And so you can't get those same security promises. And the other thing is it really limits the composability of this. It's the idea that I don't want to have, one of the problems with the traditional world is if I've got 3 different bank accounts, or I've got a PayPal account, or I've got, gaming accounts, I have this proliferation of accounts, and all of my digital stuff, my digital identity, my digital assets are all locked inside these individual silos. one of the important things about Web3 is that shouldn't be the case. It should be like, I should just own my stuff directly, and I can just selectively connect those things. So the way to do that is you want to have one wallet where all your stuff is that has the ability of freely connecting all these things, rather than having 15 different wallets that are integrated with all these different applications.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's sort of been a power user of Web3 or DeFi will understand this immediately. Like just the need to constantly put little bits of ETH everywhere. Like,
right.
And it's just like, it literally is everywhere. I've got, 3 computers. I need a little bit of ETH on every single one of those computers, but not just that. I need a bit of ETH on every single one of the accounts on every single one of those computers. And then if I need something on my phone, I've got to, do that again. And like, I must have forgotten thousands of dollars of Ethereum over the years, like the equivalent now, right? Like I can remember very clearly in the early days of Ethereum, I left $750 worth of Ethereum in one of my mobile wallets, and in like a year and a half later, I was like, I should just check to make, because I was deleting my phone, and I was like, I should just check to make sure I haven't forgotten something, and opened the phone. I was 20 grand's worth of ETH, and I was like, oh, I should probably move that. So yeah, that was fun. I think that the idea that you have this one nexus that you control all of your assets, and that then you can connect to many things, because you know for the first apps that come out, it makes sense that they're like, well, they may not have a wallet installed, so we should put a wallet in our app. But then you go to the second one and the third one, and you already see that problem. So really important. And so that's why I think mobile to mobile dApp, deep linking is such an important concept to get in there.
Exactly.
All right, so next one is push notifications and requests.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, because push notifications as a concept is something that like every app has, and it's like, oh, this isn't a big deal. Throw push notifications in there. Wouldn't this be great? But when we started thinking about it, it's like, well, what do we really mean by push notifications exactly? Like in a Web3 context, what does that actually mean? Like, who is pushing to you? Like typically you have an app which is linked to a particular application, like you have the app for this platform. And so that platform obviously can push you things that are relevant to that sort of slice of the world. But if you have a Web3 wallet, what does it mean to have push notifications? Like you'd kind of like to be able to be notified of like many different things that are relevant to you. And in fact, it's not even just notifications. Like one of the key things about Web3 is the fact that your interaction on the web isn't just information, it's transactions and assets and these sorts of things. So it's like that should be kind of part of this. Like if for example, if I'm on a dApp and I say like, okay, here's the trade I want to do. I set some things up here and I click go. It's going to send that, it wants to send that transaction to my wallet. I would expect that I would just sort of naturally like, oh, I should just get like a push notification on my wallet that says, hey, there's a transaction waiting for you. Maybe my phone was in the other room and I forgot I didn't have the desk. So I go in there and you just kind of want to have this natural thing. And once you get to like multi-party signing, which is like the next thing on the roadmap, you'd like there to be kind of like asynchronous things where it's sort of like, hey, there's a transaction from a friend of yours, which is waiting for you. And you just want to get a push notification on that. But again, that notification isn't just a message. It's like, it might literally be a transaction, right? Saying like, here's a proposed transaction. So when we say push notifications / requests on the roadmap, it's because we wanted to have a system which isn't just, all right, we're just pushing information around. We're saying we want something that's very integrated with Radix Connect, this idea of sending requests between apps and the wallet, and have that be something that we can use to almost be like a transport layer for the things that the wallet does. So there's, again, this is on the roadmap, so there's still some thinking to be done here. But I feel like this is going to be a really nice enabler for getting into like different peer-to-peer things, kind of asynchronous interactions with dApps. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff, and we want to have a flexible system for this.
It's kind of like this is a bit niche, but it's a bit like bonjour for Apple.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
And sort of like the
deep reference for people in the Apple ecosystem.
Right. But that was like, it's such an integral piece to Apple's like, it just works thing. Like Anyone who remembers the Apple ads where it was like, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, and there was this joke around the fact that the Mac could talk to the new printer that had just come from Japan, and the PC had no idea because it didn't have the drivers and all of this stuff that Apple created in the background to make the ability for different things to talk to each other in a way that meant that it wasn't just I need this thing with no context. It was the ability to send contextual information, potentially enough so that all of the required drivers and everything were in place to be able to talk. We're not talking about the same thing here, but I think that it's sort of an enabling technology at the same level. It's like you're trying to get to the point where Radix just works, but this push notification requester thing is a fundamental piece, along with the Radix Connect, which I think it's really interesting. Going back to when we were talking about, it's really important to have this long-term vision of where you're trying to get to from an architecture point of view, not just functionality. That when you have that ability to have that full architecture roadmap vision piece, you can go, okay, well, we need the wallet to be able to connect to the desktop, but is that connection? Can we make that connection so multifunctional that we can actually add features into it that we need to be able to enable future functionality and create these interfaces and pieces of technology that enable you to continually create incredible user experiences at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
So push notifications and requests. Next one is multi-party signing.
Yeah, this one comes up the developer community, and I totally understand why they're interested in it. It's very powerful, but also I'd say this is kind of on level with the multi-factor system. It's a similar thing where all of the on-ledger features are there, but the user experience is really complicated to get this right. So the idea here is that one of the really neat things about the transaction manifest, the way we do transactions, is the fact that there isn't a single signer. This is really deeply baked into most crypto platforms, where there is always a single signer and they are the caller. And basically what they're doing is they're signing a call to a smart contract. And that smart contract can then validate that signature and then act based on that. And it kind of abstracts everything else out. It calls it ERC20 contracts or calls other things and so forth like this. We really wanted to make a transaction manifest that was much more flexible and much more composable. And so and it was been integrated with this whole auth system we have, where everything is based on badges, where your ability to call your account or a smart contract or anything is based on, can you present the right badge? And one of the types of badge you can present is basically a signature. Every time you sign a transaction, it produces what we call a virtual badge, sort of within the context of that transaction, which allows you to authorize. So one of the upshots of this, the reason it's a bit roundabout, but one of the upshots of this is that basically every transaction on Radix is inherently a multi-sig transaction. There's no special multi-sig transaction. It's you literally, this gets into our multifactor. So for example, if I wanted to set up, so it's I need my phone and I need an Arculus card to be able to withdraw from my account. It's what's happening there is the account is configured to need those two virtual badges, those two signatures. It needs to see both of them. And then when you're submitting the transaction, you sign with your phone, you produce another signature with the Arculus card, those both get applied and your authorization happens. So there's the natural question then of okay, so you've got multi-sig. Cool. So now I want to do a thing where I'm setting up a DAO where these three different people need to agree 2 out of 3 to be able to have a transaction go through. You're thinking the right way, but it's not so simple at a user experience, user interface level, because while you absolutely could set up a component which requires 2 of 3 signatures to be able to do some DAO interaction, what does that actually mean from a wallet user's point of view? Because how do you, as an example, one of the promises that we make with the wallet is the fact that if there's a transaction you're signing, you can modify that transaction to an extent. You can say I can add my own guarantees and I can choose what account I want to pay my fees from. You have some power to do that. But now if you've got multi-parties involved, it's who's actually the one that's making those final decisions about what's going into the transaction and what gets submitted to the ledger. And we have this idea of a notary that's sort of the final one, the final signer, which provides some security guarantees. So what you really need to do is have a coordinated process between multiple wallets to have them sort of collaboratively collect signatures and agree on the contents of the thing they're signing. And you can't do this naively. You can't just sort of like, okay, person one sign passes it to person two. Well, once you've done that, person two can't modify it anymore. So there's this actually quite deep thing of like, how do you, this is why we call this multi-party signing. We don't think this in terms of like, well, how do we do multi-sig in the wallet? It's like, well, it's like the user feature is really, how do we allow multiple people, multiple parties to collaboratively agree on something?
Right.
And that's a much more complicated feature than just sort of thinking about multisig. If you're building your own backend system and you want to have like, I've got like, there's an authorized user and I've got these two automated systems that both need to sign to do something. Cool. You can do that today. You have all the on-ledger features. We're in fact doing that. Like we have some backend systems that we've built for our own use that are doing this. But again, doing this through the wallet becomes a much more complicated thing. And this is what ultimately enables what we saw in RadFi with the NBA ticket thing, where it's like, it seems very seamless when we show that user interface, but think about what's really going on here. What's going on here is Russ, as the initiator, he's going like, okay, I'm gonna buy these tickets and I want to involve Matt, so I'm sort of adding him to the transaction. I know he's gonna have to be a signer of this, but I'm gonna sign this part of it, which withdraws tokens from my account, and then I'm somehow going to get that from my wallet to his wallet. So this probably needs to go over some form of Radix Connect. Maybe this interacts with the push notification system. So these things are very, very interrelated. That gets across to me, and I could say, oh, okay, well, I need to sign this part of it that's relevant to me, but I add my own guarantees, and then maybe it goes back to Russ, and he's the final one that submits it to the ledger.
Right.
So we have to work through all those use cases, and that's why this is a big feature.
Not only that, right? Like Russ is paying from his account, and you're paying from your account. Russ doesn't necessarily what account you want to pay from. So he's going, I'm going to pay this part of this transaction from this account. Now Matt's going to do something and he's going to pay part of it from this other account. But like, I don't,
it becomes kind of like an invoice.
Right.
It becomes sort of like an invoice he's creating where he's saying like, you need to fill in this functional part of the transaction for it to be complete.
Right. And I think, sort of anyone who's used Gnosis Safe, which is now I think just called Safe, will appreciate how much complexity there ends up being in these things. And so like what we're trying to achieve here is a level of functionality that is comparable, but that actually happens just within the wallet and happens in a way that just feels completely intuitive and completely seamless.
Right, because the way Gnosis has had to do it, the way Safe does it, is there's a combination of a monstrously complex custom smart contract, which is sort of, doing the final sort of multisig. And then they have an off-ledger system, which is providing a lot of the user experience. It's sort of like collecting signatures, and you're inherently sort of trusting their system to do this. It's an off-ledger centralized way of sort of providing the shared collaborative experience of building a transaction. We don't want to do this. We want to like maintain the guarantees we have in the wallet. Is like, you're not trusting a centralized party. This is all peer-to-peer. This is all within your control.
All right, so moving on to sessions and streaming mode, or sessions/streaming mode. We're gonna get progressively more sort of high level and less detailed on these things. We're getting into the territory of like, we know we want this. We have rough ideas of how it works, but there's definitely more work here. But briefly, session streaming mode is we absolutely see there's a strong use case for saying, Piers alluded, you alluded to this earlier, that I think a Web3 game is a classic example. It's not the only one, but it's a really good one where someone goes, look, I want to be able to sign into this game, and during the scope of my gameplay session, there's a whole bunch of stuff like the game is, you're allowed to do these things. Like you don't have to, like, I don't want to have to like go back to my wallet and slide the button every single time, like, I get some new gold or a sword leaves my account or something like this. Like, a good use case for this was actually when anyone who saw the Red Foo hackathon, where we had the chess game, and every single chess move you had to sign.
Right.
And it's like, it's annoying. You don't want to have to do that. And anyone who's tried any gaming where you're initiating an activity that then is doing something on ledger, and that matters from the point of view of the game mechanic, you don't want to have to constantly be going back to your wallet for.
Right. So there's this really important user experience we want to enable, but once again, we get back to the promises that we want to make the user, is that you are in control of your stuff. You're not ever going to be sort of signing away privileges, kind of like, okay, application, you can now do anything you want this account. You want to have be much more intentional about this. And so, I think there's a way of doing this, which today I think is sort of like the only good way of doing this. This is actually one of the reasons why I think a lot of applications want to have the built-in wallet, because they basically say, well, we're just going to custody your assets. And if we custody your assets, then we can give you the user experience, because we'll just do everything on your behalf. We have the full rights. We can just move as long as you trust us, we're just going to move your stuff around, and you don't have to sign anything. Don't worry about it. And it's everything, so you can get the user experience. But what we would like to do, and you could do that on Radix as well. I mean, you could have something where it's like, okay, I've got my assets, but during my gameplay session, I need to do a one-time thing where I literally be like, all right, here are my game assets. I'm going to send them into a game component that sort of custodies them for during my gameplay session. At the end of my gameplay session, it sends them back to the wallet. So you could have that sort of way of doing it. And you could do that today. But ultimately, I think a better way of doing it would be to be able to say, okay, I'm starting a session here, and this application, you have sort of limited privileges to certain assets and certain aspects of my account. And we can do this because our accounts are real things. We have these account components. And so, there's a blog that I wrote about, I often think about the security of the account as like a bouncer standing at the door. It's sort of like, the bouncer is sort of like checking your passes, like, okay, I need these three to be able, if you want to pull anything out of here, I need to see these 3 badges. And he checks them, goes, okay, that's good, fine, you can go in here and you can pull this out. Those rules are pretty simple right now, but there's nothing stopping us from with basically adding more complexity to the bouncer to basically go like, all right, the user you can tell your own bouncer, you're like, look, that guy over there, that application, for the next hour, they can touch these particular NFTs in my account. And maybe and they can only touch like up to this amount of fungible tokens, but no more than that. They're allowed to do that if they ask you. You don't have to ask me. They can just do that. That's fine. And the bouncer goes, okay, cool. I'll make sure that happens. And that's all done on Ledger, which is cool. It's not custodied. It's all decentralized. It's all trustless. So we have this ability, but once again, this is going to be a combination of both. This will mean like smart account V2, and this will also mean some new functionality to the wallet to sort of enable all this stuff. So this is why it's a little bit further down the roadmap when that becomes really more valuable.
It's very cool, and it's actually like solves some real problems that I've seen in functionality on top of Ethereum that is very difficult to get around without just sending tokens into another smart contract.
Right.
And last but not least, NFC scanning.
Yeah, NFC scanning. So this is, we did a couple of examples of this, kind of a made up example of this in RadFi. We were saying, imagine you have a ticket to a concert on your phone as an NFT, and you literally want to be able to like walk in the concert venue and sort of like scan your phone and have that provide an actual trustless proof that you are in fact the owner of that NFC. Or maybe you want to be able to go into a coffee shop and tap your thing and do payment mechanisms like this. So in the end, NFC scanning is, once again, this is basically an extension to Radix Connect is kind of how we're thinking about it right now. It's basically, and the reason why we were willing to put that in RadFi was that this is definitely doable. Like, phones have this NFC capability. It's basically kind of like an arbitrary two-way communication transport layer that the phones have access to. It actually is two-way. It's kind of cool. Like, if you tap, it can actually like have a handshake, like back and forth of communication. So for example, there could be like a request to be like, hey, I need a proof of this particular NFT. And the phone goes, cool, there's your proof of that NFT, and passes it back. So this is all very doable. And it basically is another way of doing Radix Connect style interactions of requests and responses and transactions. But, this is going to require a little bit of sort of work here. Basically, the main reason it's further down the roadmap is like, realistically, we're a little ways away from people sort of integrating the Radix wallet with physical NFC scanners and doing this kind of stuff. But, at the point where this became relevant, where it's like, once we get a lot of adoption on Radix and lots of people are holding many kinds of assets, naturally you'll get people that want to start doing more interesting things with those assets. And at some point it'll reach some critical threshold where someone go like, hey, I already have this NFC reader as part of my POS terminal in my business. I'd really like to be able to just know if somebody has this particular NFT. And at that point we go like, all right, we just need to prioritize a library and get this into the wallet so people can do that kind of stuff. Right.
I think it really relies on there being a real business need for it at sufficient scale for it to be justified to sort of put it into sort of the immediate roadmap. But really exciting possibilities there as well. So that summarizes everything on the milestones. And I think we've sort of covered how those things interact with underway and backlog. So let's wrap it up there because we've been speaking for a while now. But like really fascinating, really exciting, some really cool stuff coming to the wallet. But that doesn't mean that the wallet isn't already awesome. So like go download the wallet, play around with it, go and use the dApps on the Radix network. There are some really cool dApps that have now launched and some cool stuff to go and play with over the Christmas period.
Yeah, and if you are playing around with it, I mean, it would be really good to get on our Discord channel, and if you do happen to run any bug reports, I mean, we really try to monitor that closely. Please, if you can provide bug reports in Discord, tell us what phone you're using, tell us what version of the wallet, give us the information we need. One person providing a really high quality bug report is 10 times as useful as 10 people saying like, hey, there's a problem with this thing. I've had literally like phone call conversations with a couple people where it's like, wow, this person's really helpful. Please provide those reports. I mean, if you're thinking about like, hey, have these guys thought about doing this thing? It seems like the wallet would be cool if it had this new feature. Go to the roadmap first, look on the backlog there. Cause a lot of times it's sort of like, yep, it's there. We know this is needed. It's on the backlog. So you might look there first to see if it exists. If you don't see something on there, mention it, because we're continually adding stuff onto the backlog. We have a section for basically things that we need to think more about, but we recognize that there's an interest in it. So we're definitely interested in that feedback as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Matt.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.